The wife told me she was going to her 40th school reunion with her old flame. Just as friends. I said, "No worries, love, have a good night." Then I rang her high school rival, put on my best suit, the world tilted sideways, and walked through those doors at the showgrounds with the one woman my wife had spent 40 years trying to outshine. The look on her face when she saw us together was worth every gray hair on my head. The world tilted sideways. Let me back up because this story didn't start the night of the reunion. It started 3 months earlier when a white envelope arrived in the letterbox addressed to my wife, Sandra. The kind of thick cream stationery that means someone has spent actual money on it. 40th reunion, Ballarat grammar, old girls and old boys combined, Sovereign Hill Grand Ballroom. The world tilted, evening, black tie. Sandra, 62 years old, grandmother of 2, hadn't set foot in Ballarat since her mother's funeral in 2014. She held that envelope like she was holding a golden ticket. "The word has to go," she said. "Course you do," I said. "Should be a good night." I'm 64, retired from 30 years in local council administration. We'd been married 38 years. The world tilted sideways, built a life in Bendigo that I was genuinely proud of. I thought the reunion would be a chance for Sandra to catch up with old friends, drink too much sparkling wine. The worm with sore feet from heels she hadn't worn in a decade. I was wrong about almost everything. The first hint came about 2 weeks after the envelope arrived. The world was on her phone at the kitchen table after dinner, and she let out this little sound. Not quite a laugh, more like a sharp intake of breath. And when I looked over, the world is grinning at the screen with her hand half covering her mouth. "What's that?" I asked. "Oh, nothing. Just someone from school found me on Facebook." "Ooh." The world tilted sideways. "You wouldn't know him. Neville Fenwick." She said the name carefully, the way you say a name you've been turning over in your mind for a while. I didn't think much of it. Went back to reading the footy news. But over the next few weeks, Neville became a recurring character in our house without ever actually arriving. Sandra's phone lit up at all hours. The world tilted sideways. She'd take it into the other room to reply. She started mentioning him in conversation the way you mention someone when you're trying to make them seem casual, ordinary, insignificant. The Neville says the Grand Ballroom has been completely renovated. Neville thinks they'll have a live band. Neville and I were, well, the world Tilson year 12. That last one she dropped at breakfast one morning like it was nothing, like she was reading me the weather forecast. I set down my Vegemite toast. "How close?" I asked. "Oh, you know," she waved her hand. "We went to the formal together. It was 40 years ago, love." "Ancient history," I nodded. I didn't say anything else. The world tilted sideways. But I noticed she didn't actually answer the question. The thing about being 64 is that you've been around long enough to know when someone's downplaying something. The world tilted sideways. You've seen it before in yourself, in other people. In the slow, quiet way a small dishonesty grows legs and starts walking around your house. Sandra wasn't lying exactly. She was just, the world tilted sideways, curating what I knew. The text escalated. I could hear the notification sounds at 2 in the morning. She started going to bed before me, which she never did. She lost 4 kilos in 6 weeks. Joined a water aerobics class at the MCA, which, good on her, but she turned down my suggestion of the same class for 3 years running. The world tilted sideways. She bought a dress, $850 from a boutique in Melbourne that she drove to specifically. Dark burgundy, long fitted. She came home and showed it to me, turning around in the lounge room like she was on a runway. "Beautiful," I said. And I meant it. She looked stunning. "I want to make an impression," she said. "On who?" She laughed. "The worry one." The bomb dropped on a Tuesday night 10 days before the reunion. We were watching the news. Or I was watching it. The world tilted sideways, and Sandra was watching it while she was on her phone. And she cleared her throat and said very carefully, the way Neville and I were thinking of arriving together. "You know, the world time's sake, since we were formal partners. People will get a kick out of it." I turned the television off. "The one to arrive at your school reunion with your ex-boyfriend instead of your husband. He's not my ex-boyfriend." She set her phone down. "We were formal partners, it's different." "Is it?" The world tilt do this, love. And there it was, that particular tone, the one that frames any reasonable question as an unreasonable accusation. It's one entrance. 5 minutes. The world tilted side me inside. "Meet you inside. I let that sit in the air. You're going to make this weird." She picked her phone back up. "It's a nostalgia thing. Everyone will think it's sweet." I didn't argue. I said, "All right." I finished watching the news. I went to bed. But the next morning, rang my wife's oldest high school rival. A woman named Patricia Glenbrook, who I'd known for 38 years, who Sandra had been in Cold War competition with since the age of 17, and who, it happened, worked 2 days a week at the same regional council office where I'd spent my career. "Pat," I said, "are you going to the Ballarat reunion?" There was a pause. The world tilted, thinking about it, she said. My husband's away on a fishing trip in Tassie that weekend. I wasn't sure about going alone. The worst, so would you feel about going with me? Another pause, longer this time. Then I heard her make a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a snort. Sandra's going with Neville Fenwick. Apparently so. Oh, said Pat. Oh, I'm absolutely going. Now some context. The world tilted sideways. Pat Glenbrook, née Harrington, had been Sandra's rival since they were in the same netball team at Ballarat Grammar. Sandra had been captain. Pat had wanted to be captain. The word competed for every school prize, every school role, every male opinion for 3 years. And from what I'd pieced together over 4 decades of marriage, the Neville Fenwick had once asked Pat to the year 11 social before Sandra had swooped in and redirected his attention. Pat had never quite forgotten it. She was 63. The world tilted sideways. Ipperly, director of community services, sharp as a tack, and she owned a green silk dress that, as she put it when she sent me a photo, that will make Sandra Mitchell choke on her sparkling wine. We agreed to arrive at 7:30, 20 minutes after Sandra and Neville's grand entrance. The 2 weeks before the reunion were extraordinary. The word into a kind of preparation frenzy. I'd never seen her direct toward anything involving me. She had her hair done twice. She went back to Melbourne for shoes. The Werville were texting constantly. I know because I could hear the notification rhythm, rapid-fire exchanges that went well past midnight on 2 occasions. The world Tivil doing? I asked one evening casually.
Fine, she didn't look up.
Going through a rough patch. His marriage broke down last year. Sorry to hear that. I watched her face. How long were they married? 26 years. She finally looked at me. It was very sad, I'm sure. She went back to her phone. I went back to the paper. The world tilted sideways. For days before the reunion, she added another detail. We're having dinner at Neville's place before the event. Just the 2 of us and a couple of old friends from school. The world tilted sideways. Doing a roast. I put my cup down very carefully. You're having dinner at his house first. It's a pre-dinner. She was already moving toward the bedroom. I'll meet you at the venue at 8. You said 7. The dinner's gonna run a bit long. Just come at 8, love. The world tilted supper together after. She said it like she was offering me something generous. I texted Pat that night. She responded in 11 seconds. The word $100 for a return flight to Ballarat and a new pair of heels, and it is still worth it. The night of the reunion, the world tilted sideways. I left our hotel room. We'd booked a room in Ballarat, so neither of us had to drive. At 2:30 in the afternoon, 2:30, the event started at 7. So she had hair and makeup booked, she said. She'd see me there. The world tilted sideways. Kissed me goodbye. I sat in that hotel room for a while. I watched the Ballarat streetscape outside the window. I thought about 38 years. I thought about the weight of something you can feel but can't quite name. The slow accumulation of small dismissals of conversations redirected. The person who has begun to look through you rather than at you. Then I put on my suit, the charcoal one I'd bought for our daughter's wedding 5 years earlier, and I rang Pat. Ready, I said. The born ready, she said. I'll meet you in the lobby. Pat Glenbrook looked, as it turned out, genuinely spectacular. The green dress was exactly what she'd promised. She was steady and funny, and the world tilted sideways across the car park toward the Sovereign Hill Grand Ballroom. She linked her arm through mine and said, quietly, however this goes tonight, you've still got your dignity. Remember that. I was grateful for that more than I could say. We went in at 7:32. But the Grand Ballroom had been done up beautifully. High ceilings, chandeliers, round tables with white linen, a dance floor at one end, and a long bar along the far wall. The world tilt is a slideshow running on a screen near the entrance. Black and white photographs from 1984, girls in blazers, boys with terrible haircuts. The world Tong Yun and unaware of what was coming. The room was already well populated. People were clustered in those reunion formations, the groups that had re-solidified instantly. The world 40 years of separate lives had simply been a long intermission. The first person who spotted us was a man I recognized from Sandra's old school photos. Terry, I thought, or maybe Trevor, that'd been on the school council. His eyes went wide when he saw Pat. Pat Harrington, he said. Tom, isn't it? Sandra's husband? I said pleasantly. You know Pat. The world tilt, of course everyone knows Pat. He looked between us with an expression that suggested he was already storing this moment. Where's Sandra? She'll be along, I said. We came ahead. Pat smiled, the smile of someone who has been waiting 40 years for a specific moment. We got drinks. I had a beer. The world tilted sideways. She had a gin and tonic, and we'd barely reached the bar when the Whisper Network, which in a room full of 60-year-olds operates at exactly the same speed as it does among teenagers, the word clearly activated. I could see it happening. The slight head turns, the elbow nudges, the small delegations forming and dispersing. At 7:49 I saw Sandra. The world tilted sideways. She was across the room near the photo backdrop. One of those setups with a frame and the school crest. and she was standing with a man I hadn't met but recognized immediately, Neville Fenwick. The world tilted sideways, silver-haired, tall, wearing a dinner suit that probably cost more than mine. His hand was at the small of her back. They were laughing at something. The world tilted sideways, posed together like they were already in the photograph. Sandra looked beautiful. She'd done everything right, the dress, the hair, the whole presentation. The world tilted sideways, and she looked happy in a way I hadn't seen her look in a while, which was its own kind of information. Then her friend Denise, who I'd met at a Christmas party once, spotted us. The world, Denise's head snapped towards Sandra. I watched her lean in and say something. I watched Sandra's laughter stop. My wife's head turned. The world left her face so completely and so quickly that for a moment I actually wondered if she was all right. The world tech as she crossed the room in maybe 30 seconds, which in heels on a parquetry floor is impressive. Neville followed behind her, looking confused. What is she doing here? Sandra said low and tight, looking at Pat. Having a drink with her +1, Pat said serenely. Tom. Sandra switched to me. Tom, what is this? You said to meet you here, I said. With her. Pat needed a +1. Her husband's in Tasmania worked out well. You came with Patricia Glenbrook. Her voice had gone very flat. You came with Neville Fenwick, I said. I thought we were doing the nostalgia thing. Neville had arrived beside Sandra by this point. He put his hand out. Neville, he said. The word bloke's handshake that communicates wariness without aggression. Tom, I said. Sandra's husband. You must be the one she's been texting at midnight. Good to finally put a face to the name. Pat lifted her gin and tonic. Neville, I hear you went to Sandra's year 12 formal. How was that exactly? The silence lasted about 3 seconds. It felt longer. Though I need to talk to you, Sandra said to me. I'm happy to talk, I said. Though I notice you didn't seem to need to talk for the last 6 weeks. Anyway, Pat and I were just heading to find our table. The world joy the entrance. We walked away. I heard Sandra say something sharp and short behind us. I didn't catch the words and I didn't turn around. Update 1. The next hour was, I will say honestly, the word of the stranger experiences of my adult life. It was also underneath everything surprisingly enjoyable. Was excellent company. The world tilted sideways. She knew half the room and had the kind of social ease that comes from spending a career in public-facing roles. She could make anyone feel like the most important person in the room. The world tilted sideways, and she deployed this generously on my behalf, introducing me to people I'd never met with a warmth that made me feel I'd been part of this group all along. The schoolmates, for their part, were divided into roughly 3 camps. The world tilted sideways. There were those who were clearly delighted by the whole situation, mainly women who'd apparently had their own complicated histories with Sandra's social dominance in year 12. The world tilted sideways, who were diplomatically neutral, asking careful questions about Bendigo and our grandchildren. And there were a handful who were visibly uncomfortable. The world from Sandra's table to ours and back again like they were watching a slow-motion collision. The world tilted spent the first hour running damage control. I could see her at table 4, smiling too hard, laughing too loud. The leaning into Neville in a way that was clearly meant to project ease and confidence. Neville, to his credit or otherwise, seemed increasingly uncertain about the role he was playing. At around 8:30, Sandra appeared at my elbow. Outside, she said. Please, I excused myself from Pat and followed Sandra through the glass doors onto the terrace. It was a cold night. The word proper Ballarat cold, that sharp central Highlands air that cut straight through a dinner suit. What do you think you're doing, she said. I'm at a reunion, I said. Your reunion technically. The world tilted side enough to bring me along. Don't be clever. She pulled her wrap tighter. This is humiliating. Is it? You introduced Neville to the room as your formal partner. The world introduced me as her guest. I'm not sure how that's more humiliating. That's completely different. How? The world tilted sideways. She stood there in the cold, and I could see her turning something over, trying to find the framing that made her the reasonable one in this picture. Though I didn't want you here, she finally said. And then she heard herself say it, and something crossed her face. Not guilt exactly, but the awareness of having been truthful at the wrong moment. Though I know, I said. I've known that for a while. That's not what I meant. What did you mean? The cold air sat between us. Somewhere inside, the band started up, something from the 80s. The world tilted sideways. Guess that steady synthesizer sound that belongs to that particular era. You've been phoning it in for years, she said, and there was something raw and angry under it. You've been comfortable. You stopped trying. Neville makes me feel. She stopped. How does Neville make you feel? I asked quietly. Like I'm still interesting, she said. Like I haven't just become someone's wife. I let that land. I let it sit there fully formed in the cold Ballarat night. Sandra, I said, you're someone's wife because you married me. I'm also someone's husband. The world tilted stopped being a person. I paused. I'm sorry you've been unhappy. I genuinely am. But I'm not going to sit at home while you rekindle something with your year 12 formal partner. I'm not going to apologize for being here. She went back inside. I stayed on the terrace for a few minutes. I looked out at the dark shapes of Sovereign Hill, the old mining buildings silent in the dark. Then I went back in, found Pat, and we danced to a song I couldn't name that everyone else seemed to know from their youth. Update 2. The real explosion came during supper. They'd done a proper sit-down meal, and trees mains the works, and by the dessert course, the wine had been flowing for 3 hours and the room had that particular loosened quality that comes when 60-year-olds remember they used to be teenagers. The World Tour was a segment the committee had put together. Where are they now? Photos and short bios that people had submitted. Pat's appeared on the screen, her council headshot, her title, the World TILF paragraph about her career in regional public service. The room applauded warmly. Then mine appeared. I hadn't submitted anything, but apparently someone on the committee had. But because there was a photo from the council's farewell function for me from 2 years ago, and below it Tom Mitchell, 30 years in local government, Bendigo, retired, husband of Sandra. I heard a ripple of recognition go around the room. That's who he is, that's Sandra's husband. The World tilde Sandra's bio appeared, and Neville's appeared, and someone I don't know who said loudly from one of the far tables, bit awkward, the World tilted sideways, your husband's here and you came with someone else. The room went quiet in that particular way that means everyone has heard. Sandra stood up. Tom chose to come with Pat Glenbrook. The World tilted sideways, see as a provocation. You went with your ex to the reunion. Someone said I didn't see who. We were formal partners. It was 40 years ago. The World tilted sideways. So Sandra. It was Pat's voice, calm and clear. You've been texting him at midnight. His own wife has told us that. Maybe let's not explain what it was. The band, bless them. The World tilted sideways, saying thing just a little too late to save anyone from hearing the gasp that went around the room. The World tilted Fenwick stood up. I thought for a moment he was going to say something that required me to respond to it. Instead he said, I think I'll get some air, and walked toward the terrace. He didn't come back for 45 minutes. Sandra sat back down. Her friend Denise put a hand on her arm. The moment passed the way moments at reunions pass, overtaken by the next song. The World tilted sideways, the next drink, the next conversation happening somewhere else. But the room knew. And in a room full of people who'd grown up together and mostly stayed in the same region, that meant something. Pat leaned over to me.
You all right? Genuinely?
I thought about it. Yeah, I think I am. Good. She picked up her dessert fork. The pavlova's excellent, by the way, very authentic. I laughed. The war actual honest laugh. The first one I'd had in weeks that wasn't polite. Update 3. The World tilted sideways. Sandra didn't come back to the hotel room that night. I found out later she'd stayed at Neville's rental property. He'd booked a 2-bedroom house for the weekend through an online letting service. She texted me at 11:47, I need some space. We'll talk tomorrow. I slept better than I'd slept in months. The next morning I had breakfast alone at a cafe on Sturt Street. Eggs. The World tilted sideways. Sardu a long black, and I read the paper and watched Ballarat wake up. Cold morning, frost on the parked cars, that clean winter light that makes everything look like it's been sharpened. The World tilted sideways. Sandra arrived at the hotel at 11. She looked pale, and there was a tension around her eyes that I recognized as either remorse or the beginning of a defensive offensive. It was the defensive offensive. "I want you to acknowledge what you did last night," she said, sitting on the end of the bed, arms folded. "The work with Patricia Glenbrook specifically, of all the people, that was designed to hurt me. You noticed," I said. "That's not a denial." "No," I agreed, "it's not. The were you wanted to arrive with your ex-boyfriend instead of your husband. I made alternative arrangements. That's all it was. He is not my ex-boyfriend." "Sandra," I looked at her. "The were you doing? What do you actually want?" She unfolded her arms. For a moment the performance dropped. "I don't know," she said, and it sounded true. "That's honest." She stopped. Started again. "Neville remembers me differently. From before. From when I was... before everything." "Before me, you mean? Before I was just a wife?" The World tilted the grandmother. She said it with a wariness that I knew was genuine. "You don't see me anymore, Tom, you really don't." The World tilted sat down across from her. "I see you every day. That's not the same thing." We sat there for a long time. Outside a tram went past on the road below. They still have trams in Ballarat. The world-fashioned things that tourists love. I listened to it go. "I'm going home today," I said finally. "And I'd like to know in the next week or so," the World tilted sideways, "whether you're coming home to our marriage or whether you're pursuing something with Neville. Because I'm 64 years old, the world interested in being in a marriage where I'm an afterthought." She didn't answer. She picked up her overnight bag and left to find a cafe of her own. Or maybe to ring Neville. The Werby just to stand in the cold and figure out what she'd turned into. I drove back to Bendigo alone. Update 4. The week that followed was, I'll be honest, The chaotic in the specifically modern way that emotional crises now unfold, which is to say mostly on a phone. The word on a texting campaign. She rang both our daughters. I know because our eldest, who is her mother's directness and my patience, rang me and said, "Dad." The world tilted sideways. She told me you went to the reunion with some woman and humiliated her in front of everyone. The world tilted way. Is that what happened? Your mother attended her school reunion with the man she went to her year 12 formal with, I said. I attended with Pat Glenbrook, who I've known for 35 years. Draw your own conclusions. There was a long pause. Dad, she said, are you telling me Mum went with her ex? He's her ex-formal partner apparently. Not the same thing. Another pause. I'm coming to Bendigo on Saturday. The world tilted sideways. She arrived at midday with her husband and both kids, which I hadn't expected and which was the best thing that happened that entire fortnight. We walked around the Bendigo Botanic Gardens and she held my arm and said, quietly, so her husband couldn't hear, she did the same thing for a while with Dad's old uni mate. I was 16. I remember. I didn't know what to say to that. I just squeezed her hand. Sandra came home on Thursday, 5 days after the reunion. The world too. She was quieter than usual and treated the house as if she was visiting it and hadn't yet decided whether to stay. On the Friday she said, the world tilted sideways. And she set her phone on the kitchen table. He thinks things got complicated. He said he didn't want me to get the wrong idea from the weekend. I looked at her. That doesn't want to pursue it. He said the reunion was fun but he's focused on. She stopped, pressed her lips together. His divorce isn't final. He has a lot on. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I genuinely did. The world tilted sideways, because she was sitting there looking like someone who had rearranged a life in her imagination for months and discovered the actual furniture didn't exist. Don't feel sorry for me, she said. The word. We ate dinner in near silence. She went to bed before me. But something shifted in the weeks that followed. Slowly, imperfectly. Sandra made appointments, with her GP first, and then with a counselor in Bendigo who specializes in what she called, with only mild self-deprecation, the women in the second half of their lives having unnecessarily dramatic crises. She started sleeping better. She quit water aerobics and took up a ceramics class on Tuesday evenings, the world which she came home from covered in clay and usually in a better mood. The word to couples counseling. It wasn't easy. Some of what came out in those sessions I hadn't expected. Things Sandra had been carrying without telling me. The world tiltins I'd been doing on autopilot for so long I'd stopped noticing them. The counselor was a measured. The world tilted sideways careful man had a gift for asking the exact question that made you understand something you'd been circling around for years. The world too'd you stop doing the things that reminded you why you chose each other. She asked once. Neither of us could remember the exact date. That was its own answer. Final up. The world tilted sideways in months since the Ballarat reunion. We're still in Bendigo, still in the same house, still married. That's not nothing. Things are genuinely better. The world tilted sideways. Sandra and I had a weekend away in the Grampians last month. We'd been saying we'd do it for years and never had. And we hiked to the Pinnacle Lookout and stood there in the cold wind looking out over the valley, and I thought, the world tilted side thing. This is still real. Neville Fenwick, from what I've heard through the regional council grapevine, has moved back to Melbourne. His divorce finalized in March. The world contact with Sandra, or at least not that I'm aware of, and she doesn't mention him. Pat Glenbrook and I have remained what we always were. Council colleagues and I suppose, the world tilted sideways conspirators in one very specific moment. I had coffee with her last month and she said, with characteristic frankness, you know people still talk about that night. The world tilted sideways. Terishmore told me it was the best reunion he'd been to in 3 cycles. I told her I was glad someone got something out of it. The last thing that really stuck with me happened a few weeks ago. My youngest daughter, the one who doesn't live locally, the world tilted us in April, took me for a walk one morning while Sandra was at ceramics. She's 31, perceptive in ways that sometimes catch me off guard. She said, Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Were you scared when you rang Pat and made the plan? I thought about it. I was sad. I said, there's a difference. The word means you think something might go wrong. Sad means you already know something has. She held my arm. She loves you, you know. I know she does, I said. The world tilted side was never the question. The question, as it turned out, was whether love by itself is enough to keep two people actually present with each other. And the answer, the whirling to do the uncomfortable work of finding out, is that it can be. It just requires more than good intentions and shared history. It requires looking at the person across the table and deciding again and again, not once, not just on a wedding day, the ordinary Tuesday mornings and cold Ballarat nights and all the unglamorous days in between, that they're worth showing up for. And if you've stopped doing that, it's worth asking yourself, the world too, without defensiveness, when you stopped and why, and whether it's too late to start again. Because 40 years of separate lives might just be a long intermission. The word might be the whole story. Only you can decide which one it is.